Welcome to another episode of the Pro Overwatch News Recap. Things have slowed down a bit since that explosion of news that happened a couple of weeks ago, but even so, some big news is still dropping, so let's go over it and have some good discussion, shall we? So team number one I wanted to talk about is the London Spitfire. After getting rid of everything their fanbase once knew, the Spitfire's new initial roster will consist of J-Mac and Bernard on tank, Glisser and Shui on DPS, then Krillin, Fuse, Hylian, I'm probably going to mispronounce this, but Sanguinar on support. And before continuing, I just wanted to stress that this is not a finalized version of the roster. They could very well end up getting more players before the season starts, or even after it begins for that matter. Anyway though, Krillin, Fuse, and Bernard were already on the team before the announcement, and we already know who Hylie is, so let's focus in on the players that we don't know about and get to know them a little bit better. So starting with J-Mac, he is a Korean main tank who played on LGE Huya before joining the league. LGE Huya is a Chinese contenders team that won Season 2 of 2019 Contenders, and were a participant in the Gauntlet this year. I personally haven't watched a lot of J-Mac, but from what I've seen, he could have some decent potential, and from a community perspective, I've heard mixed opinions on him. Some people think he's good, while others don't find him all that impressive. As it currently stands though, he is the only main tank on the roster, so London definitely sees some upside in this guy. Moving on to their DPS, let's start with Glisser. So Glisser is a flex DPS who formerly played on Gen G and X6 Gaming before that, so as you can see, he has a solid Korean Contenders experience under his belt. And overall, I would say the general consensus is that he's a good pickup for London. He impressed me personally in the Gauntlet, and I think he has a versatile hero pool that will be very valuable for London this year. So Glisser is currently not old enough to play in the league, but luckily he turns 18 before the season begins, so it won't be a problem. And lining up next to him is Shui, who played DPS on Runaway for about 9 months. During his time spent on there, he helped guide them to a Season 3 championship in 2018, and was part of that team that finished top 4 after losing to O2 Blast. Shui's primarily known for playing projectile heroes. It's been a while since he's been on a team, so it's interesting that he suddenly got picked up in the league, and I'm assuming he must have done really well in the London Spitfire tryouts. And finally, we have the main support player, again I'm probably butchering this, Sanguinar, and funny enough, he actually has 0 contenders experience. He basically just played in some monthly Korean tournaments up until this point. I'm assuming that probably he ended up going above and beyond during open tryouts or something, because how else would London have taken notice of him? Now since they do have Fuse though, I'm unsure of how much London will utilize him, but I'm not going to rule out the possibility of him not getting any playtime at all. I made that mistake with Fitz already, so I've learned my lesson. For those of you who don't know, Fitz actually didn't have any contenders experience either before joining the Overwatch League, and then I wrongfully assumed he would likely sit on the bench this year and not really get any meaningful playtime due to his lack of experience. But then, he kind of just proved me wrong completely there and I looked really dumb, so I'm not going to make that mistake again. But you probably have to do really well in tryouts if you want to be noticed as someone with 0 time in contenders, so I'm assuming this guy that they picked up has a lot of potential. But yeah, that's what the London Spitfire are currently looking like heading into 2020, and please remember that this roster is not finalized, so more pickups are likely on the way. But what do you guys think of London's roster? I personally think it's not too shabby. I want London fans to listen to me closely here. I know it's hard seeing that team that won a championship for you get dismantled, but this new team really isn't that bad. They actually have potential, and I think there's a chance they play beyond your expectations. They have guys who perform pretty well in Tier 2, and some guys with some good potential, so don't give up hope yet, London fans. This team could end up surprising you. I could see them being fairly competitive. I'm not going to sit here and say they're a championship contender or anything like that, but I still think they'll be a decent team. Moving on to the Florida Mayhem, they finally broke their silence this offseason by announcing the signing of former Runaway players Yaki and Gangnam Jin, who both of which I'd like to add are very talented. So even though Florida was unable to sign more than 2 Runaway players, I think they probably got the best possible options from that team really. From what I've heard, Yaki is arguably a top 3 DPS player coming out of Korean contenders, and Gangnam Jin is one of the better flex support players coming out of the contender scene in general. These are 2 very nice pickups for Florida. I think a DPS line of Saya player and Yaki sounds sick, and having BQB come off the bench as a 3rd possible option is really nice, and in terms of the flex support position, this is a massive upgrade over Byram. It's not that Byram is bad, it's more that Gangnam Jin just has a higher skill ceiling in my opinion. These new additions give Florida a solid looking lineup. Fate, Gargoyle, Saya player, Yaki, Gangnam Jin, and Chris sounds pretty good on paper. But it doesn't end there for Florida actually, as they made 2 new additions to their coaching staff by hiring Kuki as their new head coach and Dox as an assistant. So after not even being away from the league for a year, Kuki is back, but this time as a coach. And for those of you who weren't already aware, after Kuki parted ways with the Valiant this year, he became a coach on Runaway, and during the 4 months he spent there, he helped guide them to a championship in Korean contenders and a top 3 finish in the Gauntlet this year. That's pretty good for somebody with no prior coaching experience if you ask me. Kuki seems like a capable coach, and I think signing him was a really good idea. Not only does he have the skill to help this team improve, but I think giving Yaki and Gangnam Jin a coach they're comfortable with will go a long way. And as a bonus, Fate played with Kuki on the Valiant, so he has experience working with Fate as well. Dox, though, on the other hand, I'm a bit more unfamiliar with, but what I can tell you about him is that he coached the Korean contenders team known as MVP Space. But yeah, those are the moves made by Florida so far. I would say that Florida had a fairly successful offseason as it currently stands. They made some nice upgrades to this team, and the only thing I wish they would have done is sign a second main support, but with their roster only sitting at 9 members, that could very well change as the season progresses. But this seriously finally might be your year not to be basement dwellers, Florida fans. This team has promise. Next up, we have the Paris Eternal, who made a surprising move by signing former Hangzhou Spark main tank NYXL, and I say that this was unexpected because there weren't any leaks on it as far as I know, so overall, I have mixed feelings on this move. On one hand, NYXL really wasn't all that special during his time on the Spark and when he played for their academy team after getting demoted, but to be fair, Gushue was really good, so it made it hard to outplay him obviously, but NYXL really didn't impress me all that much when he actually did get playtime early on in Stage 1. But still, at the same time, I know that he used to be pretty good in contenders before joining the Overwatch League, and I know that pros also think pretty highly of him, so maybe there's a chance he improves and starts to live up to that hype. Also, I'm assuming that Paris had to settle for a low-budget main tank since they already have spent a lot of money this offseason, and because I'm assuming they got NYXL for cheap, this is what I like to call a low-risk, high-reward signing. If NYXL does not pan out in the end, it's not the end of the world since they didn't really have to spend a lot of money on him, but if he does end up playing well, then you got yourself a serviceable player for pretty cheap. Overall though, I think that you can look at this move from a couple of different perspectives, but honestly, they needed somebody else at main tank, so this was definitely the right move to get somebody else. Bembest being their only option sounded like a recipe for disaster, and I would say NYXL is a better player overall than Bembest, so some people are probably going to look at this as an upgrade. The Boston Uprising also joined in on the offseason festivities by announcing that former Seoul Dynasty DPS player Munchkin and Angry Titans off-tank Brucin would be signed to the team. Leave it to the Boston Uprising to always make these intriguing moves. It's kind of funny though because the Munchkin signing in particular is really fitting, I feel like. He's a guy who's always been a decent player, but now he has to prove himself once again after taking a break from the game. And what better team to prove yourself on than Boston, who's like the land of second chances it feels like. They are the kings of getting these types of players. Munchkin joins a DPS core of Color Hex and Jerry, and if I had to take a guess, I'd say he and Color Hex are the starting DPS by the time Season 3 gets underway. In terms of the Brucin pickup, we all knew Boston would sign another off-tank eventually since Mufin was only promoted as a two-way player. Brucin is actually a pretty underrated player in my opinion, so I'm a big fan of this pickup. Besides playing on Angry Titans, Brucin also has participated in the last 2 World Cups for Team Netherlands, and he also played for Young and Beautiful before joining the Angry Titans. While I haven't seen much of Brucin's ability on heroes such as D.Va and Hog, I know for a fact that he can play a mean Sigma. He played very well in the World Cup, and if the other tanks in his hero pool compare to a Sigma, then I think Boston fans will be really happy with what they get out of Brucin. And fun fact, you probably already saw it when I put the announcement up on the screen, but Brucin is the first Dutch player to ever be in the Overwatch League, so big congrats to him on that. Hopefully this opens up the door for some other Dutch players to get into the league someday. Moving on to the NYXL, they finally announced the promotion of off-tank player Bianca from XL2 Academy. From what I hear, Bianca is a solid D.Va player, and if a team of New York's caliber was willing to pick him up, then you can safely assume this guy has potential. But I honestly have no idea how much time he's going to get on stage. With the NYXL recently adding Hoppa, who is a consistent player and seasoned veteran, it could be difficult for Bianca to get playtime to start the year. But you never really know. Maybe the meta ends up favoring Bianca's hero pool more than it does Hoppa's, so maybe he does end up getting some playtime. And another thing we're going to have to monitor is if either of these players can fill in the shoes left behind by Meko. I personally think the combined effort of Hoppa and Bianca could be enough. And while we're on the topic of the NYXL, they also announced their new head coach is going to be IMT for 2020. And if he's been with this organization for that long, then I'm assuming this org must really like what he brings to the table. Plus, as the tweet mentions, he was the driving force behind the NYXL's playoff run. Bavane, from what I heard, actually was not super involved with the coaching during the playoffs. It was IMT who was kind of the brains of the operation, and with that said, it's very understandable why he would end up getting this promotion. The next announcement on the agenda doesn't have to do with a specific team, but instead with a player, as former NYXL and Washington Justice main tank Janus has retired from Pro Overwatch, and the reasoning behind it is that he's going to be completing his military service. I honestly do kind of feel bad for Janus though. After being part of some really good teams for a majority of his pro career, he ended his career on such a sour note. Ending your career while being considered a bottom tier main tank in the public eye on a bad team really has to hurt. Best of luck to Janus in his future endeavors though. Hopefully he stays safe during his military service. The final player announcement I have for you in this video is one that we've known about for like a week now, but Meko is now in the Houston Outlaws. I discussed it back when it was still just a leak in my previous video, but since it's now official, I thought I'd bring it up so everybody knows it's 100% true. I discussed it a lot in the previous news recap, but I find this move to be very interesting. I know Meko's English isn't horrible, but I honestly didn't think he had any desire to play for a primarily Western team. I guess Meko really likes the North American lifestyle, and since the Outlaws got Repel, Meko will have a Korean player on the roster to associate with. The Outlaws got themselves a really nice upgraded off-tank. No longer will we have to bear witness to the average at best tank play of Cool Matt and Spree. Convincing Meko to sign here is huge, and I think him and Muma had the potential to be a pretty good tank line. As a side note though, the Outlaws might end up struggling a little bit with Meko at first just because I'm not sure how far along his English is, and it could be a very similar situation to Gooshway where it takes a little bit of time to warm up to his new team and learn a foreign language. So if the Outlaws do end up struggling a little bit to start the year, don't be discouraged, Outlaws fans. I think that could end up changing as the season progresses. Anyway though, I'm pretty happy with the Outlaws for adding some nice new pieces this offseason. If they can now sign themselves another main support player who preferably is better than Boink, then this offseason will have been a massive success. Now for some coaching news. Starting with the Chengdu Hunters, they finally did something this offseason by announcing the departure of their head coach RUI. I believe he's stepping down due to some health concerns, by the way. RUI has been a crucial part of the pro Overwatch scene in China. He coached the Hunters, the infamous 0-40 Dragons, the two most recent Chinese World Cup teams, and the ever so dominant Chinese contender team known as Miraculous Youngsters. Best of luck to RUI in recovering from his health issues. Hopefully he comes back to coaching one day. The other bit of coaching news I have for you comes from the Atlanta Reign, who hired Mentalist as their newest assistant coach. Mentalist most recently coached the Korean contenders team known as GC Busan Wave. While GC Busan Wave never really accomplished anything notable during his time spent there, I know for a fact that the general opinion on him is pretty high. Plus, he did coach one of Atlanta's newest players in Edison. I'm always a fan of picking up coaches with good experience who already have worked with players on their team beforehand, so I approve of Atlanta making this move. And with that said, that is going to wrap up episode 8 of the Pro Overwatch News Recap. I know this one was a bit shorter compared to the others, but not a lot has happened lately, so there wasn't as much to cover. But even so, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, then be sure to hit the like button and sub to my channel if you haven't already. And if you wish to further support me, you can consider following me on Twitter at ATP Overwatch and joining my Discord server through the link in the description. As always, thank you all so much for watching today's video. I really do appreciate it, and until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.